she said. My ex is the best. Unlike you? I said. Good luck. I knew her ex was a con artist with 3 active warrants. My ex is the best. Madison spat, her chin tilted up as if daring me to challenge the statement. The air in our usually quiet living room, once filled with the comfortable sound of the television, suddenly felt thin and sharp. Then came the intentional, cutting comparison. Unlike you? I stood by the kitchen counter, holding a cooling mug of tea, and didn't flinch. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, and I certainly didn't argue. I looked past the proud, defensive glare in her eyes and saw only the disaster she was rushing toward. I just said 2 words. Good luck. Because unlike her, I knew exactly who her best ex was. 6 months ago, a random administrative duty had armed me with knowledge that felt like a ticking clock, a con artist with 3 active warrants, and a long string of broken lives left in his wake. If she wanted to run straight into a self-made catastrophe, I wasn't going to exhaust myself trying to stop the inevitable. My name is Ethan Parker. I'm 29. I was born and raised in the stability of Ohio, and I live a life defined by predictability and quiet competence. My apartment in Columbus was, until 5 minutes ago, my sanctuary. The loudest sound used to be Madison's distinctive, breathless giggle at reruns of old sitcoms, a sound I had come to associate with comfort. Now, it was just the echo of her departing footsteps, a sudden silence that made the sanctuary feel hollow. I felt like a safe harbor she'd used as a temporary mooring until the promise of a thrilling storm appeared on the horizon. We had been together for almost 2 years, the kind of relationship people use words like dependable and sustainable to describe. We shared bills, a meticulously organized calendar, and a routine built on mutual respect and shared habits. She used to lean into me on the couch and murmur that I made her feel safe and secure. The irony wasn't lost on me. Calm inevitably becomes boring the moment a toxic ex sends a flirty, thrilling text. The cracks in the foundation started appearing subtly, like hairline fractures in porcelain. They began about 4 months ago. Madison, a marketing coordinator whose job was as stable as mine, developed an increasing appetite for what she called spontaneity. What this usually translated to was wine, too much of it, and late night reminiscing about her past life with Caleb. She would launch into stories about wild nights, reckless, borderline illegal stunts, and spontaneous road trips that ended up being disasters but somehow sounded exciting when she told them. Every time she mentioned Caleb, his edge, his passion, or his ability to make her feel alive, there was a glint in her eye, a yearning for a fire I never sought to light. I tried to ignore it. I ignored the phone ringing at 1 a.m. that she'd rushed to silence, the cryptic, hidden texts, the sudden, unexpected plans. With Brianna and Trevor, her friends who adored chaos, and the faint scent of a different, cheaper perfume that sometimes clung to her scarves. I had always prided myself on being the opposite of a jealous, controlling boyfriend. I believed in giving space. Maybe I gave her too much. I handed her the rope she would eventually use to hang herself. My secret knowledge of Caleb made my tolerance a deliberate choice, not blind ignorance. The discovery had happened during an agonizingly dull stretch of jury duty 6 months prior. I was staring blankly at a wall of old notices when a wanted poster, slightly curled at the edges, caught my attention. The man in the picture was smiling, a practiced, charming, slightly predatory smile, as if he knew he was posing for a school photo, not a criminal database entry. The name, Caleb Rourke. The charges, grand theft, multiple counts of fraud, and 3 active warrants across 2 states. He had a few aliases. I stared at the photo, the face of the man Madison occasionally waxed poetic about, the man she described as having magnetic energy. I read the details of the fraud, running scams involving fake investments and bouncing large checks, leaving a trail of small-time victims. He was a professional charmer, a criminal wrapped in a convincing, expensive suit. I pulled out my phone, snapped a discreet picture of the poster, and tucked the secret away. At that moment, a profound ethical battle raged inside me. Did I have a moral obligation to tell Madison? My initial, rational thought was yes. But the thought was immediately followed by the memory of every time she had dismissed my practical advice, every time she had subtly suggested my life was too predictable. If I showed her a wanted poster, she wouldn't believe me, she would accuse me of jealousy, of trying to sabotage her past, Or worse, she'd find a way to romanticize his criminal edge. She would see it as proof of his wildness, not his danger. I had to face the difficult truth: she did not value my voice. She would not listen. The ultimate calculation was cold, but clear. He wasn't my problem, and if she willingly chose him, she wasn't mine either. I had done everything right. I had offered stability, honesty, and partnership. If she preferred the high-octane thrill of destruction, she had to navigate the consequences of that choice on her own. I deleted the picture but kept the image of Caleb's confident, criminal smile imprinted in my memory. 2 weeks before the breakup, Madison started disappearing for hours. She'd offer vague explanations about errands or work deadlines. There was nothing obvious enough to confront directly, no smoking gun, but the constant ambiguity was like a slow, toxic drip, poisoning the air between us. It didn't just hurt, it was an insult to the respect I'd offered her. Then, Tuesday night arrived. The apartment clock read 11:07 p.m. when she finally walked in. She looked different, a little too made up, a nervous energy vibrating off her. She didn't take off her coat. She stood by the threshold, and the air around her felt charged with finality. "Ethan, we need to talk." 5 words that carried the weight of an executioner's axe. She launched into the monologue I'd been anticipating for months. "You're kind, you're reliable, you're good," she said, ticking off qualities that now sounded like character flaws. "But I need passion. Adventure. Someone who makes me feel alive." She paused, expecting me to fight, to rage, to plead. I stayed calm. "Why now?" I asked, my voice level. She couldn't hold my gaze. The brief, guilty look in her eyes confirmed everything before she mumbled the name. "I'm talking to Caleb again. He's back in town, and he's a real man, Ethan. He doesn't apologize for his intensity." I felt a quiet, profound relief that the waiting was over. The charade could end. "I see. When are you moving out?" She seemed genuinely surprised. She'd likely rehearsed this scene 100 times, with me as the tearful supplicant. I can be out by Friday," she stammered. "Friday it is." I opened the door for her. She seemed to realize the true distance between us. My quiet acceptance was a more powerful rejection than any fight could have been. As she walked through the doorway, she turned back, desperate for a final, retaliatory strike. Her final words were delivered with calculated cruelty, meant to break not just my heart, but my confidence. "My ex was the best. You're nothing like him. You'll regret letting me go, Ethan." I simply repeated the mantra of my resignation, closing the door on the chaos she represented. "Good luck, Madison." I didn't regret it. Not for a second. I knew the truth about Caleb Rourke, the truth she had willfully ignored because the danger tasted like excitement. And as the door clicked shut, I knew the chaos she chased would soon catch her, and I would finally be free of the storm. Friday came faster than the slow decay of our relationship had promised. The apartment, our shared space for nearly 2 years, felt strange that morning, too still, too clean, like a theater stage that had been swept bare after the audience left. I had spent Thursday night methodically boxing every trace of Madison's life, her brightly colored sweaters, her collection of vintage glassware, her excessive makeup collection. It wasn't an act of petty revenge. It was an essential step in surgical severance. I needed the break to be absolute, clean, and irreversible. Around noon, my phone buzzed with the text I'd been waiting for. "We're coming up now." The use of the collective pronoun, we, was a small, new insult. It meant the drama was arriving with backup. A minute later the knock came. I opened the door to Madison, followed by Brianna and Trevor. Brianna, with her perpetually scornful expression, and Trevor, attempting to look like a protective hero, both glared at me as if I were the villain who had heartlessly evicted a wounded maiden. They were her apostles of chaos, always validating her worst decisions. Madison marched inside, then froze at the sight of the neatly stacked wall of boxes waiting by the door. "You already packed my stuff?" she snapped, her voice rising in disbelief. "Yeah," I said, leaning against the door frame, entirely unmoved by her manufactured outrage. "Makes things easier. For you," she shot back, grabbing a box with far more force than necessary, clearly hoping the visible exertion would shame me or provoke me into offering help, a plea to stay. I simply watched, a neutral observer to her self-destruction. The calmer I remained, the angrier she became, fueled by the lack of the reaction she craved. Trevor, predictably, stepped in. Man, you're really just letting her go? No fight? She made her choice, I said, my gaze locked on Madison as she dragged a box across the floor. I'm respecting that choice. Brianna scoffed loudly, a grating, high-pitched sound. She deserves better anyway. Someone who appreciates her intensity. The loading process was a tense, silent ballet of resentment. When the last box was haphazardly jammed into Trevor's battered pickup truck, Madison stood at the doorway, shaking with frustration that my peace had survived her storm. You're going to regret this, Ethan, she hissed, her eyes bright with unshed, frustrated tears. Caleb treats me like I matter. He buys me things. He makes me feel alive. That's what a real man does. You're just a coward. I simply nodded, accepting the insults as the price of my freedom. Good luck, Madison. Her face twisted, a fleeting mix of fury and fear, and then she vanished, slamming the door. The sound didn't echo. It simply cut the tension, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt like a vacuum. It wasn't the relief of victory, nor the ache of heartbreak. It was the clean, surgical cut of a long-overdue amputation. That night, I slept a full 8 hours, the first truly peaceful sleep I'd experienced in months. 8 days passed in a blissful, quiet routine. I figured Madison was fully immersed in her dangerous romance, fantasy, perhaps on one of Caleb's spontaneous, reckless trips. The image I held was of her, laughing, riding the high of excitement. Then came Saturday morning. 9:43 a.m. An unknown number flashed on my screen. I expected it to be my dry cleaner or perhaps my car mechanic. Instead, when I answered, I was greeted by a sound that tore through the quiet, panicked, hysterical sobbing, utterly devoid of the playful drama she used to perform. This was raw fear. Ethan, please, oh my God, please help me. It was Madison. Her voice was shredded, the words tripping over each other in a desperate, unintelligible mess. My stomach instinctively clenched, but not from love. It was the physical reaction to the sudden, jarring sound of chaos breaking through my carefully constructed barrier. I felt the awful confirmation of my 6-month-old premonition. What happened, Madison? Breathe, I instructed, my voice calm, clinical. I'm in jail, Ethan. They arrested me. They said it's felony theft. I didn't do anything. Please, you have to help me. I closed my eyes, picturing Caleb's smiling face on the wanted poster. It started. She managed to get the story out in ragged bursts. He set me up, Ethan. He told me he wanted to surprise me with a whole new wardrobe. We were at the West Side Mall, and he loaded a cart, designer clothes, bags, electronics. He told me he needed to make a quick call to his bank, handed me the cart, and told me to just meet him at the car. The absolute second I pushed the cart out of the exit, security swarmed me. And he just drove off. He just left me there. I felt a quiet, cold wave of understanding, a profound sense of justice that chilled any rising sympathy. This was the exact consequence she had pursued, the debt for the chaos she had chosen. She needed to own this. I asked the questions, methodical and flat. How much was the merchandise? $3,000, maybe more. They said it's a felony. My bail is $5,000. I don't have it. My parents are on a cruise, and Brianna's card got declined trying to pay the booking fee. Ethan, please. You have to be the reliable one. Don't leave me here. I'm scared. No, I said. One word. Firm. Final. Silence. A horrible, stretched silence, followed by a confused, disbelieving whisper. What? I'm not bailing you out, Madison. She spiraled, confusion instantly giving way to venomous rage. You knew about him. You had the warrants, didn't you? 6 months ago. And you didn't tell me? The audacity of the accusation momentarily stole my breath. You didn't want my advice anymore. You told me my caution and reliability made me less of a man. I am honoring your choice. You chose Caleb's world. You have to pay the entry fee for it. I could go to prison, Ethan. For something he did, she screamed, her voice cracking. Maybe. That's rough, I said, my heart rate steady, my hands still on the phone. She screamed, she cursed, she begged, she threatened me with legal action. I listened to the full spectrum of her breakdown for a few agonizing seconds, then calmly, firmly I said, Goodbye, Madison. I hung up and immediately blocked the number. An hour later, Brianna called from a number I didn't recognize. You need to help her, Ethan. You're the only one with the cash. No, I don't, I repeated. She's terrified. You're heartless. You're letting your ex-girlfriend face prison time. She chose him. I'm honoring that choice. She is precisely where she wanted to be, surrounded by the passion and excitement she idolized. I am not her safety net, Brianna. You're heartless. Then stop calling people with heartless intentions. Blocked. That afternoon, sitting on my couch, the sunlight streaming in, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The chaos had indeed caught up. She wanted excitement. She wanted danger. She wanted a real man. She got one. And he left her holding the evidence, facing the consequences alone. I didn't feel guilt. I felt the profound, overdue clarity of a boundary finally established and defended. The fallout from Madison's arrest wasn't a single event. It was a series of diminishing waves, each one weaker than the last, washing away the final remnants of her presence in my life. After the jail call and the initial barrage of blocked numbers from Madison and her friends, the apartment settled into an uneasy quiet. It was the silence you hear just after a storm has passed, the kind that makes you instinctively know another squall is building. I thought the crisis was contained. I was wrong. 3 days after I refused to bail her out, the social retaliation began. I was at work, deep into a financial audit, when Brianna, Madison's self-appointed drama ambassador, stormed past the reception desk. She reached my cubicle cluster, completely ignoring the stunned looks of my colleagues, and began screaming. You ruined Madison's life, Ethan! You let her rot in jail! She was your responsibility! Her voice was shrill, attracting every eye in the open-plan office. I kept my voice low, intensely calm, and professional. Brianna, you are trespassing. Madison is suffering the legal consequences of following a known criminal into a felony. That is not my responsibility, nor is it yours. It is hers. I signaled to security, who arrived swiftly and escorted the screaming woman out of the building. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint, and she was permanently banned from the premises. Simple. Clean. Done. Madison's chaos had failed to breach my professional boundary. But Madison, still blinded by self-pity and entitlement, was not finished with her bad decisions. 2 days after the workplace incident, a certified letter arrived, taped dramatically to my door with bright red packaging tape. It wasn't a birthday card. Inside was a legal summons. Madison Rourke was suing Ethan Parker for failure to warn and emotional distress, demanding $15,000 in damages, the exact amount she estimated she would lose in wages and legal fees. Her claim hinged on the premise that because I knew about Caleb's warrants and didn't tell her, I was an accessory to her misfortune. The sheer, breathtaking absurdity of it was almost comedic. I immediately forwarded the documents to my attorney, David, a weary, pragmatic man who had seen everything. He called me back 5 minutes later, a dry chuckle in his voice. Failure to warn? This isn't a bottle of bleach, Ethan. This is a person with free will. We'll file a motion to dismiss, and we'll countersue for our fees. This is the definition of frivolous litigation. The court appearance was brief and extremely satisfying. Madison, dressed in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, stood with a public defender who looked profoundly embarrassed. I stood with David. The judge, a woman with zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics, listened to Madison's claim for approximately 90 seconds. Mr. Parker, the judge addressed me. Did you have a legal or familial duty to supervise Ms. Rourke's adult decisions? No, Your Honor. We were a dating couple whose relationship had ended. Did you, at any point, instruct or coerce Ms. Rourke to commit the crime of felony theft? Absolutely not, Your Honor. She turned to Madison. The relationship was over. You are an adult. Your attempt to transfer the blame for your poor choices onto your former partner is baseless. Case dismissed. She then ordered Madison to pay my legal fees of $1,200. Madison's face went slack, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. She looked like she might genuinely collapse in the courtroom. Yet she still wasn't finished with consequences. Next came the trial that actually mattered, her felony theft case. She rejected a plea deal that would have reduced the charge significantly, insisting that the surveillance footage was blurry, and that she was merely an innocent victim of Caleb's manipulation. She believed her tears and her story would sway a jury. I didn't attend the trial, but David kept me updated. The prosecution was ruthless. The surveillance video clearly showed Caleb loading the cart, whispering instruction to Madison, and pointing to the exit while she calmly pushed the unpaid merchandise out the door. The final nail in her coffin was the testimony of a previous victim, a woman Caleb had run the exact same surprise gift scam on a year prior. The jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes. Madison was convicted. The sentence was severe: 3 years of supervised probation, a permanent felony conviction on her record, destroying her career prospects, over $3,500 in restitution to the mall, plus heavy court fines and community service. Her life didn't just crack, it had been utterly demolished by the consequences of her own desperate yearning for drama. The next day, Brianna, using yet another burner number, called one last time. "I hope you're happy now, Ethan." She lost everything. Her job, her clean record. "You could have stopped it all with $5,000. My voice was steady, utterly devoid of emotion. "She never wanted my help, Brianna. She chose him and she chose chaos. She has the consequences she earned." I hung up and filed the number for blocking. It was the last time I ever spoke to any of them. The final piece of the financial entanglement was the $1,200 she owed me for the dismissed lawsuit. She tried to dodge payment, but David filed for wage garnishment, which became possible after she landed a minimum wage job. She now paid me $100 a month. That payment was not a victory check. It was a monthly reminder of her choices and the enduring consequence she had to live with. Meanwhile, my life finally, truly stabilized. 6 months after the breakup, I met Emily, a high school history teacher. She had a warm, genuine laugh, a stable career, and zero appetite for drama or chaos. She found joy in the simple, dependable things: quiet evenings, good conversation, and shared plans for the future. What Madison had once scornfully called boring turned out to be the deep, sustaining peace I hadn't realized I was starved for. 2 months later, I moved out of the apartment Madison and I once shared. On my last night, I stood in the empty living room, the one where she had delivered her final, cruel monologue. The place everything began unraveling was now just 4 walls and silence. I didn't look back or linger. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked away, feeling something simple, profound, and long overdue: true peace. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I had succumbed to the pressure and bailed her out, or if I had warned her about Caleb 6 months earlier. The answer, I knew, was that it wouldn't have mattered. She would have only found a different path to chaos. She didn't choose me, she chose the drama she idolized. And chaos, in its fundamental nature, doesn't care who gets burned in the process. Madison got the excitement she demanded, the real man she bragged about, and the catastrophic consequences that accompany mistaking dysfunction for love. I didn't emerge as a winner or a loser. I simply survived the fallout of a storm I had the foresight and strength to refuse to enter. And sometimes, surviving the chaos is the real victory.